Hello again. Okay, so where were we? Oh, right. The world is ending. We're all totally fucked. The institutions in power are driving us all along a highway of misery towards mass extinction, and the mainstream solutions we're being sold are actually making things worse. The state, capitalism, all the major institutions of power are based on warfare, genocide, and colonialism. They will not save us, and we should not save them. We've also seen amazing movements around the world that have stopped airports, blocked pipelines, won back stolen lands. We know there's another way. But what about all of us who don't live anywhere close to a huge, inspiring revolutionary movement? What do? Just wait around for something to happen? No matter where you stand, there are important things you can do that will increase the chances of survival for you, those around you, and the ecosystem you're a part of. Actions that will also strengthen a global revolutionary movement that is our best hope for destroying the causes of all this misery. We're not offering any simple solutions, promising that if everyone follows us, it will be okay. We don't have a blueprint for revolution. And that's the whole point. There is no respectful way to impose a blueprint on a territory. There is no coherent way to force people to be free. The methods that created this disaster cannot fix it. There's no real way to decolonize without abolishing the institutions, the worldviews, and types of relationships founded by colonialism. There is an unbridgeable chasm here. We can either act like a state, or we can be a respectful member of our ecosystem. Ecosystems are embodied and relational. They don't follow blueprints. And because of that, they're infinitely more intelligent. We're not offering you the answers. We'll all become smarter if we search for those answers for ourselves, but in relation to one another. What we're offering here are 3 urgent suggestions for a methodology. A way of creating a method that arises from your specific histories, needs, relations, and the territory that gives you life. For a number of years, I participated in a space in Catalunya, where I lived, that was an infrastructures gathering. This was a moment when the anarchist movement was growing, when struggles were getting more and more fierce, more and more effective. We were beating the cops. We were taking over streets and neighborhoods. We were stopping the demolition of social centers, stopping deportations. And in that, a lot of people were asking the question of how to organize. And generally, I think they took what we could consider like a classical leftist approach to organization. They thought of organization as a thing that had to be prefabricated, pre-designed, and like if you build it, they will come, kind of thing. At the time, a lot of people in the movement were spending a whole lot of energy in lengthy debates that kind of became like a substitute to action, to carrying out activities. It became a substitute to participating directly in these ongoing struggles, because it seemed like first they had to create the perfect organizational structure. And often that took years. And once they finally had agreed to their organizational structure, some of these groups didn't even last that long. They lasted less time than it took them to create those organizations. There was another group of us who took inspiration from the generations before us in the struggle, like the Mita, like the Oya, people who said that organization is a verb. Organization is the organization of the tasks of the struggle. So first you have activity that, if it's effective, helps generate more activity, and then you organize it in different ways so that it can overcome the next set of hurdles that it's inevitably going to encounter as it grows. So basically we were recognizing that there was a flourishing of a new type of project, and we wanted to create a space for those projects to come together and organize themselves at an even more effective level. We wanted to look at this as an ecosystem that we were creating. We wanted people to believe different things, but we also wanted to be real, not be naive, look at historical struggles and understand what ways of showing up actually kill off the ecosystem, what ways of showing up create dead zones. Pretty much the only limitation was no political parties, no authoritarian groups, no pro-state groups. We were looking for groups that were in some way anti-capitalist, anti-authoritarian. Many of them were anarchist groups, others didn't identify that way. And no groups that were fully a part of the nonprofit industrial complex. We didn't want groups that were on a path that so many times before has been attempted, only to betray our struggles, only to let us down. The future is going to be messy, it's going to be complex. So we need to be open to learning, but being open to learning is not the same as saying that everything goes. If we don't remember our histories of struggle, if we don't remember the many mistakes that we've made, the mistakes made by those who came before us, then we're bound to repeat them.
If we trust the state, democratic reform, electoral victories, political parties, or authoritarian revolutions one more time, we are ignoring the real history of all those institutions, and we are turning our backs on the generations of struggle that have come before us. The hour is seriously late. We can't afford to make the same old mistakes one more time. We don't talk to cops. We don't trust politicians. We don't put our faith in nonprofits or green entrepreneurs. We don't get our hopes up if there's an election or referendum, and we don't believe millionaires have a right to exist. None of these power holders and none of these institutions deserve any more chances. As anarchists, we don't support gulags or prisons or judicial executions. We distinguish between people and institutions. And we know people can change. Institutions, however, are impervious to all the good intentions in the world. They won't do something that is contrary to what they were designed to do, any more than a circular saw can treat a gunshot wound. The institutions of the dominant society that originated in colonialism and has manufactured ecocide have to be abolished. And people who, given the choice, choose to keep working on the side of oppression and hierarchy in exchange for power and a big salary are choosing to threaten our lives and all life everywhere. We can't expect them to act like people if they're choosing not to. And we do have a right to self-defense that supersedes any laws. We reject these institutions, but we don't need to be purists about it. If you can get a grant to get your project off the ground, take that money. But here's the critical test. Will that money ever prevent you from extending solidarity to other people in struggle? In other words, are you bought out? Or are you funneling resources to the resistance? Would you still have access to those resources if those in power knew what you're actually doing with them? In our struggle, we will need moments of clandestinity and moments of open rebellion. We don't need to go out in a blaze of righteous glory every day of the week. We can't. Often we need to hide the knife we're carrying, hide the antagonism. So when we get ourselves in a messy, impure situation, are we still operating with the full awareness that the state is our enemy? And are we still committed to its destruction? Because the moment we think we might be able to come to an understanding with the state, any form of state, we have become our own worst enemy. The very existence of the state is a war against everyone. The war is happening whether we choose it or not. Admitting that the war is already here gives us the power to fight back. It also helps us understand the source of the immense exhaustion and trauma in many of our lives.
In a capitalist or a statist sense, infrastructure would be the structures that kind of rest below everything, that hold everything up, that allow for the extension of state power and the accumulation of capitalist profits. Things like highway systems, electrical grids, at a massive scale that can power, the factories. The highways that can transport the goods, ports that can, move goods internationally. But what is an infrastructure for anarchists, for revolutionaries, for people who are trying to change society, for a radical struggle? Infrastructure are the spaces where we can actually come together and create relationships. That infrastructure might include places of learning radical skills, learning radical histories. So we noticed that there were a lot of these projects that were focusing on building capacities, and there were all sorts of these different groups that we realized had, existed. And one amazing thing about them is they were much less ideologically focused, which didn't mean that they didn't think about theory. It didn't mean that, they weren't smart about different approaches to revolution, but it meant that what they were putting first was creating something that gave us a capacity that we didn't have under capitalism, a capacity that the state or that capitalism steals from us. People know what they need in their day-to-day work, especially if they ever have the time to stop and think about it, or if we have an intentional space, that in this case, that would last like 3 days, a couple times a year, where we were curating a space or facilitating a space that really enabled and encouraged people to identify their needs, find out what they have to offer, what they really want to share, and what they need, and then allowing people to make their own initiatives. And that initiative might actually bring together all of the different projects there, or it might only bring together 2 projects or 3 projects. It might allow, 4 people who are there who don't have any project, but, want to find one. It might, link them together so that they can create one. We trust people to organize themselves, and that, I think, is a fundamental feature of anarchism and of effective struggle.
Remember, you're not a superhero. You don't have to do everything. Don't exhaust yourself. It's better to show up to the struggle for the long haul, so you can be there to tell stories and share experiences for the next generations. Find a project that's relevant to you, that meets a need or explores a desire of yours. If you can't fight for your own life, you can't fight for anyone else's. We need solidarity, not saviors. Maybe it will make the most sense for you to join a project that already exists. Maybe your best option is to create a new project with a couple close friends. Maybe one day you actually talk with your neighbors and find out they'd also like to help turn that vacant lot into a garden. A shared need can bring people together, like a support group for people with similar chronic health problems. Other times, it's having different talents that make an exciting project possible. What good is someone who writes books if they don't know anyone who knows how to print and bind them? Different talents create new possibilities when we bring them together. In these projects, don't look for perfect agreement between everyone involved. It's 1,000,000 times more important to be able to handle disagreement. Understand that there is still an important connection, a relationship that makes the project worthwhile. What kind of project should you envision? That depends on you, on your relationships, on the territory that gives you life, on the needs, the conflicts, the battles happening in your neighborhood, in your neck of the woods. Ask yourself, what am I good at? What would I like to be good at? What resources do I have? What resources would I like to cultivate? Who are the people I might be able to work with? And what are their skills and resources? Now, how do we meet our shared needs? With the skills and resources we already have, or the skills and resources we think we can cultivate? How do we meet our needs not just to achieve the bare minimum for today, but in a way that transforms society itself? Planting native trees in flood zones and along riversides, creating local food forests. Those are steps towards transformative survival. Learning how to generate electricity on a small scale, to build or remodel houses that can be heated or cooled through passive solar and good design. More steps towards transformative survival. Projects for liberatory education that help people self-actualize without requiring access to family wealth. Those are steps towards transformative survival. Community gardens that proactively confront inequality and resist gentrification. Now you're thinking about historical oppression, long-term survival, and immediate struggles. That's transformative. Legal collectives that help revolutionaries beat their charges. Prisoner support groups that help us survive behind bars and then survive the violence of re-entry. Those definitely help us fight the state and live to fight another day. Housing cooperatives and land trusts that operate in parallel to our movements, getting housing access to the most precarious among us. More steps towards transformative survival. Facilitation trainings and mediation groups that can help movement projects deal with inevitable conflicts and conflict avoidance. Those can help us move towards transformative survival. Social centers, radical libraries, people's history projects, anarchist news sites, printing presses, bookstores, video collectives, pirate radio, even a radical show on the local college radio. All of those are really helpful, potentially transformative projects. Supply depots for natural disasters or economic meltdowns. Free clinics, healthcare collectives, massage and yoga groups, therapists who can give free sessions, hospital workers who can sneak you into the system, combat first aid trainings, HRT distribution, harm reduction initiatives. All of those can keep us alive. If they're infused in a sense of solidarity and a practice of mutual aid, they are revolutionary. Affinity groups that keep the walls talking with radical graffiti. Affinity groups that learn how to safely step it up and smash banks or burn luxury condos so that rich people also feel the pain every time the cops kill someone. Over time, networks of affinity groups that know how to get rid of heavy machinery and deal with surveillance technology, that learn good security practices, that figure out what kinds of damage won't be covered by insurance, what kinds of attacks will be the most costly. Campaigns of sabotage that stop gentrification projects, block the construction of new pipelines, or put energy infrastructure out of service. We can't legally advocate those actions, but it is an accurate description to say that they are ways of responding to structures and institutions that threaten our survival. Old-timers and storytellers, ex-prisoners and risk-takers who talk about clandestine and illegal acts, who hold the door open between the above ground and the underground without leading potential infiltrators or loud talkers to active affinity groups. They prevent the pacification of struggle and the isolation of the fighters. They help make transformative struggle possible. Self-defense groups who train in martial arts and counter-surveillance, weapons use and de-escalation, who are available to do event security and protect us from the far right. Groups that learn to move together in a crowd or find ethical ways of keeping reformists and authoritarians and pacifists from controlling protests or strikes or blockades or encampments. Groups that cultivate networks and platforms to help put out our own calls for protest. They are taking steps towards transformative survival. A lot of these projects might not seem like they have anything to do directly with the ecological crisis. Actually, all of them give us a greater chance of surviving outside of capitalism and surviving as the ongoing catastrophe worsens. They can also give us our best shot of taking down capitalism sooner, especially if we take on the third element of this methodology.
One of the most important things for me about this experience was seeing what happened, seeing the transformative effect of people connecting their projects to a revolutionary web of solidarity. So this focus on connection is what we can refer to as an ecosystemic approach to revolt. Creating an ecosystem of revolt. An ecosystem is where you have very, very different participants, very, very different forms of life, very different types of beings that come together, and through their difference they create something more. That they're interdependent, that what one needs another can give, and vice versa. And it's not transactional, it's not quantitative, no one's keeping accounts. And maybe one organism or one species or one person or one anarchist project is really only creating something that this other species or this other type of project needs, and isn't getting anything back from that species or that project. But that's okay, because eventually it all comes around, and eventually they all support each other and they all make life possible for each other. Or in the case of radical infrastructures, they all make struggle possible and more effective. And so when you have a struggle get stronger and then connect in this way, it can go to the next level. And that doesn't mean that, we automatically win. We're not like producing revolution, like this thing that's growing quantitatively. And inevitably, when we transform in these ways, we're going to encounter a new set of problems. We're going to find that the things that were an advantage in the past might become a disadvantage. And that's fine. That's inevitable. We have to learn, we have to adapt, we have to understand our circumstances and be true to those circumstances rather than being true to some kind of narrow dogma. None of us can do everything, but there are so many different things that need to be happening in concert, in connection, for like a truly transformative struggle to take place, because we all need to eat, we all need a place to sleep, we all need healthcare, we all need to learn and share what we've learned, we need memory, we need all of these different skills, all of these different capacities. And if it's siloed, if it's just put on single track issues, then we're isolated. We're easy to control. We're easy to fool. But if we're connected in this web of solidarity, that's when things can take on such a different approach to life. We remember that we're not just isolated individuals, that we're actually part of something so much bigger. And that just has so much potential to help people imagine life without capitalism, life without the state, and then to create it, to become a part of it.
So, what is solidarity? Real solidarity. Solidarity means showing up for people who are in a tough situation. It means having people's backs when they're in danger. It means their struggle is our struggle. It doesn't mean only showing up for people who agree with you. It doesn't mean only supporting the interests of your organization, your party, or your country. Now that's got some implications. It means that solidarity comes into conflict with borders. It comes into conflict with political parties that need to seize power. It comes into conflict with vanguards who believe they possess the absolute truth. It comes into conflict with obedience. Solidarity implies an ecosystem. It thrives on difference. There are a million different niches, a million different approaches to life. You're not supposed to all be the same. You're not supposed to be in agreement, free of conflict. Everyone is invited, as long as they can respect those differences, those different niches. Those who make existence impossible for all other forms of life, they can't be members of an ecosystem. A factory that produces toxic sludge doesn't create a vibrant habitat. It makes it harder for others to survive. What about webs? A web is a network. It's decentralized. It's resilient. It doesn't have a head. It's not going to fall apart if you cut any single strand. But it is definitely stronger and healthier and smarter the more connections there are between different elements in the web. A web can grow and include new elements, new members, without subsuming or destroying their nature, their unique characteristics, their freedom, their power to make choices. Whether we're aware of it or not, we're always part of a web. We always exist in relationship with others. We breathe together with trees and algae in the seas. Our immune systems are built up by the rest of our species and by the complex ecosystem of microbes that exist in our gut. We only have language thanks to the spontaneous, communicative webs that run between all humans. And the tendency isn't towards one universal language. It's towards thousands of languages, unending diversity, just like in an ecosystem. Hierarchical institutions don't give us life. Webs of relationships do. Recognizing that decentralized networks are a fundamental feature of life itself allows us to approach life more intelligently and to help the living ecosystems of this planet to thrive again. How about revolutionary? A revolution is a major change or upset in the order of things. As anarchists, we're not interested in political revolutions, a change in government, who holds power. We're talking about social revolutions, a major change to the very organization of society so there is no more centralized power, no more domination. In the mainstream conversation on the ecological crisis, even those who talk about change aren't talking about revolutionary change. But what about groups that organize protests and blockades, that talk about prison abolition, decolonization, or food justice? That spread criticisms of greenwashing and green growth? Often they're using revolutionary language and aesthetics. Sometimes they use the same tactics we use. But other times they say we should put our criticisms aside and vote for the lesser of two evils. They act like experts or professionals. They go to conferences with academics, politicians, and business leaders. And every time strong resistance breaks out, they show up to wherever the TV cameras are and talk out of both sides of their mouths. They take credit for what's happening, but they also try to rein it in. They demonize the most radical elements. They pacify it. And the ones who seem to do the most organizing work, they're always exhausted and bitter, running from campaign to campaign. Even if they're doing good things, like helping people in regions hit by major floods and hurricanes to get access to clean water, it's like they're treating the symptoms and refusing to attack the cause. It's like they're radical, but not revolutionary. Rowdy, but going nowhere fast. How can they accomplish that? Through a single issue focus. By siloing each of these problems so we don't see the connections between all of them. When we let our projects connect in a spirit of solidarity, we break those silos. We break the myopia of single issue politics. We learn from each other. When we understand how all our problems are interconnected, we begin to think and act accordingly. None of us can do all of it, and we can't just gradually build more and more projects until the scarcity of capitalism disappears. Remember the exhaustion of all those nonprofit workers addressing the symptoms but not the cause? That's part of the strategy of pacification used against us. The important thing is for these projects to exist, for these skills and experiences to exist, because in an unpredictable moment they can spread like wildfire. Remember how ZODs spread all across France and beyond once the struggle against a single airport started to heat up? Remember how dozens of blockades and campaigns against pipelines began once more people started hearing about Standing Rock? How mutual aid networks spread all across the world in the first months of COVID? That uncontrollable expansion? That was a rhizomatic effect, an ability we develop when we have strong networks. These networks need to be global. The struggle is global, and our solidarity must be as well. Some territories in the world have been treated like the mines or the trash heaps of the global economy. Colonial capitalism has organized entire countries to be banana plantations. Meanwhile, in other places, we have access to clean water. Well, sort of. And to productive infrastructure, like factories that can be repurposed to make tools we actually need. Freedom can't exist within borders, behind a wall. We can't be anti-capitalists and enemies of colonialism if we just destroy the global economy without building up global networks of survival and redistribution. Especially considering how many parts of the world fully exist as colonies today, deprived of the land and the tools to feed themselves, entirely dependent on exporting minerals or cash crops to pay for their subsistence. Neither can we just export the ways that wealthier countries do things. Industrial monocrop agriculture is a failed system, dependent on petrochemicals. It produces hunger and deserts. Similarly, standard housing in Europe and North America is made from unsustainable synthetic materials with wasteful designs that consume huge amounts of electricity. To feed and house ourselves, we need to consider ancestral techniques from colonized ecocentric peoples, as well as recent innovations that might be developed in the favelas of Sao Paulo, the informal settlements of Cape Town, or urban gardens in the wilds of East Cleveland and Detroit. The knowledge, the techniques, the resources, they all need to flow in multiple directions. Mutual aid needs to go worldwide. Networks of international solidarity improve our chances of surviving repression and surviving the ecological catastrophes that often cause capitalism's life support systems to collapse. Especially in times of systemic instability, democracies are more likely to become dictatorships. Dictatorships are more likely to offer the false promises of democracy, and authoritarian movements will arise on the left, asking us to trust them once more. Look around the world. All of these modes are currently in place. With networks that are both global and intergenerational, we can learn from people who know how to survive them and even overcome them. Global networks of solidarity provide us with comrades who can help us outwit internet shutdowns and communications blockades, who can raise funds for us, attack the embassies, business interests, and military suppliers of the governments cracking down on us. They can help us sneak across borders and house us, get us back on our feet in a country where it's a little bit safer, at least for the time being. That's only possible if we create those networks. If we reach out to radical projects on the other side of the world and become pen pals. If those with the privilege of a so-called first world passport renounce tourism and instead travel to build solidarity. Not traveling as individuals, but as delegates, members of their own projects and radical communities. We all have things we can share. Our histories and experiences don't reveal universal truths, but they're forms of knowledge that can cross borders and be adapted to other circumstances. From democracy to dictatorship and back again. From Los Angeles to Athens to Oakland. From Cairo to Barcelona to New York City. From Oaxaca to Standing Rock. From Rojava to Myanmar. From London to Hong Kong. From El Alto to Durban. We learn from each other. We inspire each other. and our rebellions spread and grow stronger. Now, we need to learn to survive in the hard times, the bloody times, impoverished times, the depressing, isolating, quiet times, without losing the inspiration, the sense of collective power, or the lessons we've gained in the insurrections and revolts of the past decades. There's no guidebook, no lessons or conclusions that will be equally valid for everyone, no method that will work in every part of the world. And we don't need that. We need to learn from the world. We need to learn from the earth, from our neighbors, from our inner voices, from our own unique histories. We'll be smarter, stronger, and more irrepressible that way. We're not giving you answers. We're bringing you an invitation. This struggle has been going on for hundreds of years. In some places for thousands. We don't know if we'll win, but we do know that this system of domination is destroying life all across this planet. Our home. We're not going to turn our backs on that. We're rejecting their lies. We're doing what we can to fight for collective survival. And we're connecting with everyone else who's in the same boat. It's revolution or death. Are you with us?